From a humble farming family, a young man tries his luck by migrating to the city. There, he meets the most dangerous woman. This woman happens to be the boss of the Yakuza, someone no one dares to cross. Yet the naive young man falls in love, unaware of the fate that awaits him. So how did it all begin? This is the story. The film begins in a grand hall where the two largest Yakuza groups in China gather. These are the White Lotus gang led by Mr. Lim, and the Black Dragon gang led by Xinghua. Both are longtime rivals in the world of crime and mafia. Shortly after, Mr. Lim's daughter, Ariane, also arrives. Her presence immediately captures everyone's attention. Without delay, Xinghua requests Ariane to perform a dance. Mr. Lim's daughter is well known for her swordplay. Ariane, not wanting to shame her father, reluctantly dances. However, one of Xinghua's men scatters broken glass on the floor. Ariane's feet are wounded, and she feels humiliated. The laughing perpetrator is swiftly silenced by her sword. A few days later, Xinghua is at his regular barbershop. His men outside pretend not to see a woman arriving. Moments later, Xinghua is found dead, his body marked with slashes. The death of the Black Dragon leader sparks much speculation. Gukong, the gang's right-hand man, accuses Ariane of playing with fire. He vows revenge for what has happened. On the other hand, the White Lotus gang believes Gukong orchestrated everything. For he has long harbored ambitions of seizing control of the gang from Xinghua. To ensure his daughter's safety, Mr. Lim plans to send Ariane to America. Meanwhile, he will negotiate to prevent the conflict from escalating. But Ariane declares that she will choose her own destination. A few days later in Korea, a local Yakuza boss named Yangbi summons one of his men. His name is Han, and he is ordered to pick up a guest from China. Han tries to refuse because he doesn't speak Mandarin. However, the boss's decision is final, with no room for argument. As a Yakuza, Han feels that being polite is not his job. But his two subordinates suggest this might be a test to get a promotion. Hearing this, Han becomes fired up with excitement. At the airport the next morning, they wait for the guest. Ariane's arrival shocks them when they discover she is a woman. Ariane hands over all her luggage for them to carry. Han tries to intimidate her to assert his authority. But Ariane, who dislikes talking and doesn't understand their language, remains silent. Upon arriving at the casino, Han and Ariane are stopped. Yangbi is in a meeting with another gang boss named Jackdo. Jackdo tries to impose his will to gain an advantage. Growing bored of waiting, Ariane barges into the room. Jackdo, feeling interrupted, leaves with a threatening gesture. Afterward, Yangbi politely welcomed Ariane. He asked about Mr. Lim's well-being in fluent Mandarin. Yangbi then explained that all of her needs would be taken care of by Han. Though a bit dim-witted, he was still reliable. When Han attempted to sit down, Yangbi gave him a disapproving glare. Together with his two subordinates, Han brought Ariane to their shared headquarters. Unfortunately, only a former storage room was available. Without saying much, Ariane dismissed and kicked Han out of her room. Han was annoyed but could do nothing about it. To assert their dominance, Han, Gongxi, and Domi pretended to train hard in the yard. Their loud shouts reached Ariane, who came outside to see what was happening. Sensing her attention, Han started hitting for real. His subordinates groaned in pain, begging for mercy. Ariane then joined them in the yard to show the proper way to punch. She also taught them how to train for physical endurance. A moment later, a woman arrived looking startled and frightened. The woman, named Yonhee, was a language translator. She was immediately ordered to begin her job. Han spoke to Ariane through Yonhee, saying she should obey him. Ariane responded that she wouldn't take orders from anyone. Realizing the tension between them, Yonhee began twisting the translations, making both sides sound polite and respectful. Ariane then gave a command to find a certain woman. If they failed the task, she would kill them all. Thinking it was a plea for help, Han happily agreed. Later, Yonhee was ordered to cook but tried to refuse, stating that translation was her only duty. However, Domi threatened her, leaving her no choice. Once the meal was ready, Ariane sat in Han's chair. In Mandarin, Yonhee whispered to Ariane that she would try to find a way out for her. The next day, Gongxi and Domi went to a garment factory, with Ariane and Yonhee tagging along. Soon after, Jackdo's men showed up, creating tension. With a little help from Arion, Gongzi and Domi managed to take down all their opponents. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Yangbi was informed that Jackdo's gang was starting trouble. Han became furious upon hearing their behavior. That night, he went to meet his subordinates. He apologized for being late, but Arion cursed at him. Luckily, Yonhee translated it into a compliment, making Han feel proud. After drinking too much, Han ended up vomiting in the bathroom. At the same time, Jackdo's men returned. One of them kicked Domi to put him in his place. Annoyed, Arion warned them to leave. But when they kept pushing, Arion immediately took action. Domi then rushed to the toilet to inform his boss. But Han, thinking he was just drunk and making things up, brushed him off. Meanwhile, at their enemy's base, Jackdo's men reported back with bruised faces. Furious that they were humiliated by a woman, Jackdo ordered them to contact Yangbi with a warning. The threat eventually reached Han's ears, even though he believed he hadn't done anything wrong the night before. Yonhee then asked about their progress in finding the woman. She was Arion's mother, who had long ago been divorced by her father. Han immediately ordered Gongzi to bribe the police, as usual. Yonhee warned them that they had to find her. That night, Arion's photo finally landed on the mafia boss's desk. Jackdo grew curious upon learning that Arion was Chinese. He then instructed his right-hand man to invite Arion over. The next morning, Han's car was suddenly stopped in the middle of the road. Arion immediately sensed what was happening and switched vehicles without fear. With no choice left, Han dragged Yonhee along to follow them to the enemy base. Upon arrival, his two subordinates had already been beaten up. Han tried to remain polite to clear up the misunderstanding, as Yangbi had instructed him to avoid any war. However, Jackdo asked him to sit down and talk first. He said they would be spared if they agreed to work for him. Han, of course, refused. Loyalty in the Yakuza was a core principle. He would rather die than betray his gang. Hearing this, Jackdo challenged him to a duel as fellow Yakuza. A fight between the two then began. Unfortunately, Han kept getting hit and fell helplessly to the ground. Feeling pity, Arion secretly helped him land a hit. Gaining confidence from that, Han then boldly challenged everyone present. But he was quickly overwhelmed and beaten badly. Arion had no choice but to step in and take down all of their enemies. Before leaving, she warned Jackdo that the matter was settled. If they ever came back, she wouldn't hesitate to kill everyone. Arion's skills left Han and his men speechless. Yonhee began to feel more powerful, knowing they would no longer dare to act out. On the way home, she even claimed Gongzi's room as her own. Meanwhile, Han became increasingly respectful toward the quiet Arion. The next morning, Arion and Yonhee's breakfast was prepared with great care. Gongzi and Domi didn't even dare to take too much food from the table. Yonhee continued to twist Arion's words to make the others more obedient to her. Back at the main headquarters, Jackdo had come to apologize. Fortunately, Yangbi was still willing to show some goodwill and immediately ordered them out. He then called Han forward, signaling that his position had now shifted. He was promoted to right-hand man. Han thanked him politely, barely able to hide his joy. Meanwhile in Hong Kong, Gukong, now the leader of Black Dragon, hired an assassin. The target was none other than Arion, who had to be eliminated in secret. Gukong also wanted the news to reach Mr. Lim, hoping to strike fear into him. That day at a shopping center, Arion, while strolling around, quickly sensed danger. She left her companions and followed her instincts into an alley. 3 assassins then emerged from their hiding spots. Han, who had just arrived, stepped forward calmly, thinking they were just common thugs. But the assassins, without warning, opened fire. Arion immediately fled with the others. In hiding, Arion's shoulder had been wounded by a bullet. Han reported to Yangbi that they had just been targeted by an unknown gang. He then ordered the others to head back while he would create a diversion. As he exited the alley, Han came face to face with the assassins. But instead of attacking, they ignored him and left, leaving Han completely baffled. Upon returning to their base, Han claimed that the attackers had fled in fear. Everyone calmed down except Arion, who didn't understand the local language. Yonhee was then instructed to first buy some medicine and bandages. Gongzi later voiced his suspicion about the attackers' identity, suggesting that they might have been sent by Yangbi himself to avoid a potential mutiny, especially since some people weren't happy with Han being promoted to right-hand man. Moments later, Yeonhee suddenly reported that there were suspicious people outside. The group had no choice but to move again, splitting into two groups. A vehicle soon appeared and began chasing them. 3 cars sped through a tightly packed residential area. The assassins managed to bypass Domi's vehicle and continued toward their target. Aryong immediately took over the wheel and chose an unusual alley route. Han enjoyed the moment while Aryong remained focused on driving. Unfortunately, they nearly crashed into a truck that appeared out of nowhere. Without hesitation, Aryong accelerated down a steep staircase. The assassins followed close behind. Eventually, their car crashed into a pickup truck, losing track of their quarry. Meanwhile in Hong Kong, Mr. Lim received a report from his right-hand man, Wang De, that the assassins had located his daughter. Mr. Lim became deeply worried and was determined to confront Gukong immediately. At a repair shop, Han was fixing the car when he received a call from the big boss. Han accused Yangbi of deliberately sending assassins. Hearing this, Yangbi became furious and demanded Han return to HQ immediately. Disobeying Yangbi's orders, Han instead took Aryong back to his hometown. Han's family and the local villagers welcomed them warmly. His parents were delighted to see that someone finally liked their son. But Han quickly clarified that he and Aryong were just friends. For a while, the two were able to hide peacefully. Han tried to joke around, but Aryong remained silent. Eventually, they fell asleep side by side, like a real couple. Back in China, the two Yakuza bosses finally met face to face. Mr. Lim said that war would only bring loss to them both. He offered to give Gukong anything he wanted as long as he left his daughter alone. But Gukong insisted that an eye must be repaid with an eye. He refused to negotiate and walked away. Mr. Lim was suddenly blown up in an explosion. In the kitchen with his mother, Han was given a simple necklace. She wanted Han to place it around Aryong's neck the next time they were alone. Aryong, who overheard the conversation, became emotional. Later that day, Han's father invited Aryong outside. Knowing that she couldn't understand Korean, he used pictures to communicate. With a big smile, he asked if Aryong liked his son. Aryong politely replied that she was still considering it. A few days later, Han and Aryong finally returned to the city. Yeonhee, along with Gongxi and Domi, welcomed them back. Aryong then borrowed Yeonhee's phone to contact her father. However, the call failed to connect despite several attempts. From afar, the assassins had already arrived. Accepting the challenge, Aryong followed them to the designated battleground. Inside, Han was finally told the full truth that Aryong was the daughter of a Yakuza boss embroiled in a deadly power struggle in China. That was the reason assassins had been sent to kill her. At an open field, the two sides immediately faced off. Aryong knew these were the ones who had killed Xinghua under the orders of the power-hungry Gukong. She struck first, throwing a knife and killing 2 of them. Only the female assassin named Kyondel remained, who quickly counterattacked. The two clashed fiercely until they were thrown outside. Cornered, Aryong lured her enemy into a warehouse. The fight continued there, and one of Kyondel's swords slipped from her hand. Meanwhile, Han and his crew searched through the warehouses, looking for Aryong. Kyondel advanced with her last remaining sword, but Aryong suddenly dropped to the floor, vanishing from her enemy's sight, leaving her to strike blindly. Moments later, Kyondel suddenly froze and stood still. From the road, Han finally saw both Kyondel and Aryong emerge side by side, only for it to be revealed that Kyondel had been stabbed in the stomach. She collapsed and died in agony. A few days later, Han took Aryong to a flower shop. It was the address of the woman who had once given birth to her. Aryong went inside and spotted a photo of her mother with her new family. She kept walking until she saw the woman herself. But she didn't dare approach, choosing instead to leave with tears in her eyes. The next day at the airport, Aryong thanked them for all they had done. Han then gifted her the necklace, which Aryong accepted at once. But she left without saying a word. Han tried to stop her to finally express his feelings. Unfortunately, Aryong didn't understand his language and couldn't wait any longer. Upon returning to China, Aryong found her father barely alive, his body ravaged by burns. All she could do was apologize and beg him to hold on. But Mr. Lim eventually took his last breath, as tears streamed down her face. Several days later, Aryong was shocked when Han showed up. He had followed her all the way to China. He had come to return a photo of her mother, left behind in Korea. Aryong was moved and immediately kissed him. That night, while her subordinates were asleep, Aryong went out alone to seek revenge. One of the Black Dragon members was holding a wedding celebration that day. Gukong arrived, welcomed with grand festivities by all. Quietly, Aryong found her way to the bride and threatened her in private. When Han woke up, Aryong was already posing as the bride. Her face was covered with a traditional Chinese wedding veil. A ceremonial sword was then gifted by Gukong to the groom only for Aryong to draw it and strike without warning. A chaotic battle erupted right in the middle of the wedding celebration. As Gukong was being escorted to safety, Han and the White Lotus gang arrived. A full-blown war broke out between the two Yakuza factions, each fighting to determine the victor. Meanwhile, Aryong chased Gukong through the alleyways. Anyone who dared to block her path was swiftly taken down without mercy. Before long, she managed to intercept her target. But Gukong fled and sent his men after her. When one of them tried to shoot her, Aryong hurled her sword without hesitation. On a rooftop, the two Yakuza bosses finally came face to face. Aryong declared that one of them had to die. Gukong responded with a threat of his own, standing firm with a long sword in hand. Aryong readied herself for the final clash. But suddenly, Gukong drew a pistol and shot her, cheating in their duel. Aryong fell to the ground, seemingly defeated. At that moment, Han appeared, screaming in panic. Gukong didn't hesitate and shot him as well, sending him falling from the rooftop. Fueled by rage, Aryong rose again and finished her enemy off for good. On the pavement below, Gukong's lifeless body lay in ruin. Aryong's tears turned to joy when she saw something unexpected. Han had miraculously survived the fall. A few days later, Aryong, now the Yakuza boss, was welcomed with reverence at the headquarters. Her enemies had finally surrendered. Han secretly peeked through the window, but Aryong noticed his absence. Wanga then informed her that Han had just left for the airport. Without delay, Han's car was intercepted on the road. Surrounded by dozens of Yakuza like a wanted man, he was ordered by Wanga, on behalf of their boss, to propose immediately. A grin spread across Han's face, though he pretended to resist. The gang humorously circled him, placing dozens of blades around his neck. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, the two ran toward each other and embraced tenderly. Aryong warned him sternly, cheat on her, and it would cost him his life.